When you look at a world map, it seems pretty straightforward, right? Just a collection of clearly defined countries. But that simple image, well, it hides a really complex political reality called state recognition. So in this explainer, we're going to walk through how that map gets completely redrawn depending on who you ask. To get right to the heart of it, let's just start with a big question. Is Taiwan a country? The fact that there isn't a simple yes or no answer that works for the entire world, that perfectly captures the puzzle of recognition we're going to piece together today. So what exactly is recognition? You might think, hey, if you've got territory, a population, and a government, you're a country, right? Well, in the world of international relations, that's really just the starting point. At its core, state recognition is a political decision. It's one government formally saying to another, hey, we see you. We see you as an equal, as a sovereign state. It's not a status you can just declare for yourself. It's something that has to be given to you by others. Okay, so this whole thing really boils down to three core principles. First, it is political. It's based on interests and relationships, not just checking off some legal boxes. Second, it's bilateral, meaning it happens between two states at a time. And finally, it's completely voluntary. There's no world government that can force one country to recognize another. All right, with that foundation, let's start our map walkthrough with the world as most of us know it. Let's establish that global baseline of states that pretty much everyone agrees on. Our starting point, the 193 member states of the United Nations. These are the countries that enjoy widespread, near-universal recognition. This means they get to exchange ambassadors, their passports are accepted almost everywhere, and they can join big international organizations. This is the bedrock of the whole global system. But okay, now it's time to zoom in. We're about to leave that clear-cut world behind and enter the diplomatic gray zones, the places where those neat, simple lines on the maps start to get, well, really blurry. And this is where we run into the whole idea of partial recognition. This is what happens when an entity is considered a sovereign state by a big chunk of the world, but is completely ignored or even rejected by another. It creates this incredibly complex, divided status on the world stage. Kosovo is a perfect example of this. It's formally recognized as a state by a lot of Western nations, the United States, most of the European Union, but it's not recognized by others, including some members of the UN Security Council and even a few EU countries. Its diplomatic life really depends entirely on which country it's dealing with that day. And the status of Palestine, it's even more varied. A majority of UN members do recognize it as a state. However, many other countries, like the US, recognize it only as an authority or an entity, not a fully sovereign state, and then some don't recognize it at all. This creates all these different layers of diplomatic relationships across the globe. This brings us to a really crucial distinction: de jure versus de facto realities. Think of de jure as meaning by law. That's the formal, legal thumbs up from other countries. But de facto means in fact. That's the reality on the ground, where an entity is acting just like a state even if no one's officially signed off on it. And this brings us right back to our opening question about Taiwan, which is maybe the clearest example of a de facto state out there. I mean, it has its own democratically elected government, a powerhouse economy, a modern military, and it issues its own passports. And yet, because of immense political pressure, most countries do not formally recognize it as a sovereign state. And look, this isn't an isolated thing. We see these same patterns of limited or disputed recognition in places all over the world, like Western Sahara in Africa or Abkhazia in the Caucasus region. Each has its own complex history, but they all live in the same diplomatic gray zone. So we've seen what these gray zones are, but that leads to the next big question. Why do they even exist? Why can't the world just agree on a single map? The answer, as it so often is politics. Yeah, recognition decisions are rarely about just ticking legal boxes. They're driven by pure strategy. A country might withhold recognition to please a powerful ally. Just think of the global pressure China exerts regarding Taiwan. Or it might be worried about setting a precedent for its own territorial disputes, which is a big factor for some nations in the Kosovo case. Now, this might all sound like some abstract diplomatic game, but these decisions have massive real-world consequences that affect everything from travel to trade, impacting the daily lives of millions and millions of people. Just think about it for a second. Does your passport get you across a border? Can your government open an embassy to help you? Can your country join the World Health Organization? Can airlines even establish direct flight routes? All of this is shaped by that messy patchwork of recognition decisions made around the world.
So, if there's one thing to take away from this, it's this. Recognition is not a simple, static fact. It is a dynamic, ongoing process. It's where foreign policy theory meets the real world. It is, quite simply, politics in practice.
The world map is never truly settled. It's constantly being redrawn by these choices. So the question I'll leave you with is this. Armed with this new framework, which diplomatic gray zone do you think will define global politics next?